That was faster than 2 minutes.
Yeah, but it gives me a chance to run this way for a minute.
Okay. Let's pass these around a little bit. These are our revised protocols. If you've seen them online, they're the exact same ones that are on paper. All one thing.
Are we sharing?
You're gonna have to share them, yeah. Already done. Go ahead and get signed in on here.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so I guess we're all signed in, and it looks like we have our best attended meeting thus far, so I think we have a quorum. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for another year of service to the community. We have a lot to get through today with the new protocol rollouts, so we'll try to move things along as quickly as we can. We have 2 communications that came into us after I sent out the initial agenda. One is from Mecklenburg Volunteer Fire Company, advising us they are changing their medical director, and it looks like their new medical director will be Dr. Jerry Emmons. And it looks like all this paperwork is in order, and we haven't yet voted on our new policy about how to do this, so I think that that's just an FYI for us. And then the other one is another kind of FYI blessing from us or from the council, from Springwater Wayland EMS, that they are changing their BPCR software. It will still be in compliance with the state and sync up with all of the QI stuff appropriately. So again, nothing we need to do about it, just it's okay that they're doing that. The previous minutes, does those make it around to everybody, Mike? Were those in the packets there?
I did not put those in the
Okay.
packet.
I might have those somewhere for people to look at. Here we go. Prior meeting minutes. If people want to look at those, I guess we can come back to approving them then. But while that's going around,
I think they sent the minutes out. I reviewed those. They were,
Yeah.
were they attached to the email?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
better.
had a chance to review them.
All right, does anybody have any objections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve them? And a second? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving along with our old business, so the collaborative protocol rollout, at this point we are basically a year into the new collaborative protocols. We have given ample opportunity, I think, to allow all of our providers to be in compliance with our new protocols. There was some question making sure that everybody that wanted the opportunity to do so has done so. As we discussed last meeting, the thought was today that we could vote any providers who are not in compliance with the protocol rollout would have their credentials to perform ALS in our region suspended until such a time as they are in compliance. Guess I need a motion. Did we have, I know Skylar, you said everybody's in compliance.
Across the region, everybody is based on the last submitted rosters. If you engage in anything, at this point in time, there's nobody who needs any action.
Okay.
You all should make a recommendation of how often we want to gather those rosters to make sure that that's okay.
So in terms of how often we're going to be keeping updated rosters, again, that's going to roll into our new protocols. But we have requested, Mike, have we received rosters from any agencies thus far?
We have some as of September,
Okay.
and everybody's checked off.
Good.
Yeah, Skylar cleaned up their three folks.
Sounds like it's a good point, then.
I suppose it is. QI update, we have Marianne Teeter here who has graciously fallen on the sword of QI.
She caught it when it got thrown at her.
What was that?
I caught it when it got thrown at her.
Yeah. Actually, I shared with Terry Simons, and I think Terry wasn't able to join us today. But we're in the process of updating and revising the whole process. And we're looking for any kind of direction or issues or measures that STREMAC would like us to address in the region. So we just want to put that forward to see if there was anything other than our standard that we look at. Obviously, look for compliance with protocols. And we still have this, my understanding is the reports are coming in, still focusing on cardiac arrest, trauma, stroke, GCS less than 15, and I think sepsis was the new one that they talked about. I don't know if that had really rolled out last year, so that is something that
There were no really
Meet.
benchmarks that we could meet for the
Okay.
sepsis. There was nothing really rolled out to us where, I think that was the difficulty.
That's what
It's
you
trying-
wanted.
It's trying to find out how do we benchmark care
Mhm.
for sepsis.
Okay.
Not only how do we recognize sepsis in the field, but how do you benchmark it? So.
And actually, I kind of went back historically because I remember sitting in the command center with Dr. Huffner, figuring out the process of how we were going to roll out QI in the EMS region back in 1997. And we're one of the few councils and regions that have gathered that data since 1997, and we still have that. Now, there's some gaps. But I don't think the process really needs total improvement. I think it's just the way, by the time it comes to you, it's blinded, not that we can't go back and drill down. So looking forward then, we'll be giving reports to STREMAC at the meetings that we proceed in the region. That's about it.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dasha, for doing that.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything that the members think would be a good target for us to start looking at QI for a specific topic?
Nothing comes to mind at the moment. Have we looked at pediatrics lately?
We haven't looked at pediatrics in a while. I know they did do that, and I guess we need more specifically, what would they want to look at with pediatrics?
I think before when we did it, it was just pediatrics as a whole. And the problem with that was is that there was such little data coming in with pediatrics that it really wasn't beneficial. I mean,
It's time consuming to review this data, as everyone knows. But if there, again, if you run across anything that you feel that we need to look at and address, we'd be happy to do so. But
So
overall, we do very well when you look at our trends.
if nothing's leaping to mind at the moment, and you think of something tomorrow, shoot Marianne and I an email, I guess, is the way to proceed. Okay, so far so good. The PAD program update, Mike?
We're continuing to send out an update, folks. We cleaned out the files, and we have a bit of a challenge with folks coming into compliance as far as reporting. We have a couple of very consistent filers. Our fire department turns everything over, and several of the volunteer agencies in this county do, but most don't. But we're letting them know again, we're sending the paperwork out to them, we're actually paying visits to them. We came across a couple AEDs that weren't authorized, and they were happy to, go through the paperwork, and we also do a little bit of training with them at the same time. So there's hundreds of them, we're making our way through that file.
Brandon, the paramedic program?
Paramedic program, everything going strong, 21 students at the moment. We're actually on the back half of everything, which is good. Take a couple of weeks off here for the holiday break. I just rolled out their timing right now. They're getting ready and maybe we've spoken about this before, but I'll just recap. They're getting ready to start their last phase of field internship. Part of the new National Register requirements require that they've had previous field experience, but this is it's a little more concrete of an experience. They call it an internship. And they have to be successful in 18 out of 20 calls that they run. So that is going to be a little bit of a challenge for some of them, because some of them have waited longer than others to really embrace some of their clinical. No surprise there. No surprise there.
Yeah.
But within this new internship, it's not so much skills, although that is a component. It's more the team leadership and delegation. So that's a big part of it. They could potentially, let's say they flow up a 90 that particular day, but if everything else was okay, their leadership skills were good, they delegated as is, they treated patients appropriately, that's a positive contact for them. So that's a little bit new for some of our preceptors, and I've emailed this to all our precepting agencies, kind of just saying it's a new form, it's a new format, and how they evaluate the students is slightly different from years past. Since the last meeting, we had our co-amps visit. Overall, things went really well. There were a couple little things that we got dinged on, which are very easily corrected or easy to correct in the next few months. Pretty favorable report. We won't get actual word of if we were successful or not until our current class gets done. They wanted to wait until our current class got done and then put more data together. But overall, the evaluation was good. They spent 2 days here, went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Right, I still have there. But overall, yeah, Dylan sat down, I sat down. We went to a couple precepting agencies. We went to AMR and Corning. I took them over to Irways as well, so thank you to folks for talking with them. They spoke with some preceptors, they spoke with Dylan, they spoke with Mary Ann. We managed to wrangle up a couple ED nurses and a couple of the residents and speak with them about what they think is going well or what could be improved. So, but very busy 2 days, but overall, it was a pretty positive report from their end. So, long term, looking at when we do get accredited, it's more than a year out, right? Is that what I remember?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to wait for our current class to get done, and they have to meet.
And then meet again.
In Texas, yeah, then meet again. So it's probably at least a year before a plaque goes on the wall or anything that you can actually touch.
But Brandon, you did an incredible job
Thank
bringing
you.
all that together.
Thank you.
In general, though, with the paramedic program, you're doing
Thank you.
a fantastic job. Lucky to have you.
Excited to be here, thank you. And I will say, on that note, involvement from you, Dylan, has been spectacular, and from your residents, so whether you're making them by twisting their arm, I don't know, Rob, what do you think? But no, the residents have been.
Depends on the residents.
Right, between Dylan and the residents,
Yeah.
Dr. Call is here, Rosman a lot, Dr. Johnson, so we've had a really big involvement by the physicians this year, which is amazing.
And that impressed the site surveyors
Yes,
too. They
yeah.
really did.
Yep, Dr. Sapp, we've had probably at least 10 residents kind of make their way in and out, all with great reports from the students.
And anything that impresses them is,
Mhm.
Yeah.
They were very impressed with that. The other thing they were impressed with, I could just add this, when they did the preceptor interview in the ED, one of the residents just happened to be one of our paramedic graduates who had a picture of his graduating class on his phone that he showed the surveyors. So it was like the circle of life.
Moving on to the next item on our agenda is our revised STREMAC policies. So first of all, thank you everybody for all the hard work in getting these pulled together and revised. Looking back, as we've seen, some of them date to the mid to late 90s, so we're much in need of a review. I think in talking with Mike, the easiest way to do this is to make a motion that we approve the policies as a group, and then we can go through and remove any of the ones from that overall approval that we don't want to approve as one group, and then we can discuss those separately, and then either bring them back for a vote at this meeting, or if they need more significant revision, for a vote at our next meeting. but hopefully that'll keep us on track a little bit. I will pull right now the RSI protocol out, that was a draft protocol that Rob put together. I think we definitely do want to talk about this meeting. But the rest of them, if somebody wants to make a motion to proceed with approving them, okay, thank you. Second? All right. In looking through them, some of them have red lines. Those can be edited out in the final draft, but those were some comments that Mike and company put in that I think are very valuable.
The red lines are actually by the author of that
Okay.
policy. The only things I changed were, I made something generic. We took out references to CC and paramedic, because now it's CC, AEMT, and paramedic, and we categorize that as ALS provider. I just make things generic.
We may also want to pull out the PCR disposition policy, which is the old one is 0303. MSTAR has its own policy, and the council has its own policy on how PCRs are supposed to be handled, and we may be able to just collapse all of those into a single unified policy for the region.
Was the life insurance policy removed?
It certainly can be if you'd like it to be.
I just had questions about that because it only pertains to one county.
That, I didn't put it in the packet,
Okay.
because I was trying to research that,
Mhm.
and that was my question. It refers to, basically to one county, and it was rather, it needed to be revisited.
Right.
So I think Bill and I agreed to pull lights,
Yes.
sirens, and PCR before it got to this
Okay.
packet.
All right.
Does this ever come up? Mission on the sea?
Yeah, I had a big conversation with you.
I've read it recently.
It's a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Happened recently and continued into the emergency room.
Yeah.
No, shut down.
So the RSI is being pulled out for further discussion in this meeting?
So ours will be discussed further. We will remove the license sirens, and we'll remove the PCR ones to collapse them into one regional policy.
The refusal of medical assistance, I know in other areas that there is a refusal, every one of those gets a medical control phone call. And I see that it's not in this policy, I don't know if that's something we consider, if we're happy with leaving that out, our paramedics can make that decision.
I have no problem contacting medical control if there's a refusal, but you'll spend more time on the phone than you will treating patients.
Do you get that many?
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
certainly with lift assist calls.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe breaking down where you want a refusal, where you want medical control contact, may be a better deal if patient required any ALS interventions prior to the refusal, if the field provider feels that the person needs ALS interventions, then maybe, but is still refusing, then medical control should be contacted. But, you know, you get a car accident with 8 people in it, and we were sent because it was a car accident, and all 8 people want to refuse, you want to get 8 different phone calls on that. There's, you know, even if you take the lift assist out of it, there's still a lot of refusals that happen. I would say there's probably 10 to 15 refusals that are waiting a day.
Yeah,
So-
that's a lot more than
I would get those calls occasionally, even though there's no policy on that, right? If there was a question of the patient
Right.
having a head injury, intoxicated, or.
Usually when the provider is really concerned about the patient and really thinks the patient needs to go to the hospital and they still refuse, that's when they pick up the phone and say, here, you talk to this person and see if you can convince them. But it's, you know, just a blanket call medical control if the patient wants to refuse transport is, I think that would be overwhelming to the physicians.
So are we leaving the policy as is, or are we pulling it for further discussion?
Sounds like we're leaving it.
That's it,
Yeah.
since we work it.
nothing else, and people have had sufficient time to review online or in person right now, when somebody feels ready, if we could make a motion to approve these?
Motion's been made already, I think you just need a
We just need to
vote.
vote, okay, I guess that's true.
Again, it's all, everything except for the ones that were pulled.
Okay, so, all in favor of approving except for the aforementioned policies? Aye. Any opposed to approving these policies? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We have new updated policies. Thank you, everybody. All right, so that brings us smoothly into our next issue, the RSI protocol that Rob put together last month with the thought that we would like to perhaps offer this as an advanced skill to some of our most advanced providers in the region for the sake of patients, especially patients perhaps going on long transports needing this capability. Now, Brandon, you had some good feedback on this policy, such as making sure that there is adequate cadaver experience and whether we need to do human cadaver labs or pig labs or more OR time. You want to speak to that a little more?
Yeah, so I had weighed in a little bit from, I guess, two perspectives. One from education and two from a guy who's done RSIs. There needs to be some level of cadaver experience, like Dylan said, whether it's getting folks in the OR. I don't know if getting up to University of Rochester or SUNY is possible, just because of cost and travel and, you know, all those things that are inherent there. But could we do some type of pig experience, some type of,
I think OR experience is out, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
Ross, but don't they have to have a New York State class?
Yeah,
Enrolled in the current New York State class before they
in the
can,
hospital, clinical lives, they
Right.
have to of course,
it has to be tied to a,
unfortunately.
yeah.
The Penn State after that.
So maybe that's out. But just, you know, I wanted to make sure that the education piece was there and just up front, and the providers truly realize what they're getting into when they go down this road.
are we actually talking about maybe having a regional class for,
I would-
that
Most other regions.
people would have to take to
Yes.
become RSI certified?
Yes.
That was part of the education and stuff, with it.
Yes,
Make sure they
it's
know.
not just handed to you, it's a required class. It's one, like the policy says, it's 100% QA.
Yeah.
So it's not that your QA is great, so you're nominated by Vision Nabisco, you're RSI certified, that you actually have to
No,
take a
it's,
class.
there's a class.
And definitely the ongoing QA component.
Right. And now, is there a refresher requirement? built in?
Usually yearly.
A yearly refresher
Usually.
requirement?
I mean, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. I know Rob spent time with it, but if you just look at our adjacent regions and how they do it, that might be a decent place to start.
And that's what the protocols that I made were pulled from. I took
Right.
different wording from each
Yeah.
different agency in each different region and took the one that sounded most restrictive to restrict when people would use this and make sure it's done appropriately.
Right.
Is there a need in our areas for this?
I'd say so.
We have some transport times, you're 40 to 45 minutes from the hospital
Yeah.
in Savannah County.
Is this going to entail just paralytics, or is this also going to entail facilitated?
Facilitated. On the right.
I mean,
Facilitated.
is facilitated going to be opposite, you know, like a
Facilitated should not be,
It's going to be separate from the rock or the.
facilitated should not exist, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, gets me crazed, this whole discussion gets me crazed a little bit. What I can only tell you what I tell the people in AMR, and that is the only airwaves I want are people going near a blade is a crash airway, period. End of discussion. That's all I'm going to say.
I fall in that line a little bit as well.
I mean, we've definitely seen our airways seen our need for innovation decreased when we put CPAP in place years ago.
Correct.
And that is, and that has done two things. It has been better because you don't have to innovate as many people, but it's also been bad because there's not as many innovations happening.
That is definitely.
In the 25 years I've been a paramedic, I can count on one hand the number of times that I could say, boy, I wish I could paralyze a person to innovate them. So is it? But where it does come into appropriate play are those critical care paramedics that are taking these super sick people long distances, 2 hours away, and there's no brick and mortar hospitals within a reasonable time frame during those transports. You know, this is where the RSI really should be looked at, and that should be for the critical care transports, the critical care paramedics, who not only have received the advanced training, but they're also taking the sickest of the sick far away.
The reason we started looking into this, a couple of medics on their trips to Cleveland or New York City or up to Rochester, which are frequent trips for them, have come with intubated patients and had issues maintaining the airway with not being able to keep the patient paralyzed and other things. So it was more of for just safety during transport and maintaining airways and things on longer trips was where they said that there was the biggest need for it. And it'll be done under the direction usually of the facility that's sending the patients, so the doctors are making the discretion and just telling them when it's appropriate.
Another good thing about doing this with the critical care paramedics is that, at least with us, every time a critical care paramedic is taking a critical patient, they have to make contact back with the critical care physician for the agency, and then that's something that can be discussed as well in that discussion that they had. But having a foundation of being able to do it is.
Other thoughts from the room as to whether this is even something we should be doing?
So, critical care,
It's the old SCT, well, we call it SCT medic,
SCT.
but it's critical care.
Are
They're the ones
they-
with events that,
Right,
yeah.
do they have
Yes.
privileges already?
So RSI, no.
No, they don't, okay.
They still need to do a training or
It is an
class.
inherent part of that curriculum. It's an 8-hour day
Okay.
with some version of cadaver, maybe even a minimum pig, but it is part of that curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. So,
I definitely don't see the need for it besides like Rick said, transfers only.
Right, that seems to make more sense and where I can see it being used, sure.
We've all seen where we gotta get someone out of the ER quickly out of all the hospitals and we can't fly that day or other things. So this could put someone on the ground who normally we wouldn't be comfortable putting them on the ground and transporting them a longer distance.
well, yeah, but, and that's something that the physician that is transferring that patient needs to consider whether or not that patient should be intubated prior to treatment. Or the decision that you have to make.
But yeah, I understand, like, in the winter and he can't fly and they have to get up strong and you're worried about him if he comes in the way, but it's less likely, but there's some concern. There is definitely more, if you have a helicopter, you're more confident because they can intubate. So why can't we train our critical care paramedics to have that same confidence?
I do ask you guys to maybe not think solely as emergency room physicians when you're dealing with this possibility too. Because a lot of these patients are going to be coming out of the emergency room. A lot of these patients are going to be coming out of the ICU. So sometimes you have to think like an ICU attending and how they perceive transporting people by ambulance. So a lot of times, and that's why we have physicians at Airways when we do someone who's really sick, that we have physicians that we call and can speak to about these transports, because a lot of times the ICU attendings aren't familiar with ambulances, they're not familiar with the capabilities of an ambulance, they're not familiar with the capabilities of a paramedic, period. And sometimes you have to explain that to them and they still don't get it, they just want this person to go. And so safety is the #1 concern. And so sometimes, a a lot of times you guys just think like emergency room physicians. Sometimes you have to think like ICU physicians. Because it's more than just patients taking out the ER.
Certainly a difficult issue. I agree that the times in which it should be done in the field is minimal, if ever. But I very much understand what Rick is saying, and even, patients who were intubated prior to transfer, lost their airways somehow en route, and making sure that our paramedics have the ability to reestablish those airways in the safest way for the patient. But also, I have concern about how often are we going to be doing this skill such that our medics are maintaining an adequate level of proficiency at it so that it can be done safely.
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's so rare that you are going to need this to begin with.
Well, certainly is.
That's also a portion of limiting each agency to a certain number of people, so that those people are more frequently on those, so that they'll get the more chances for it. They limit to the 1 or 2 critical medics per agency, and the longer transports, when this is more likely to occur, make sure that they're the one on the ambulance transporting said patient. They'll have the most chance of encountering it if necessary.
And that's great if those
Yeah,
paramedics
yeah,
are on
yeah,
duty
yeah,
at
right,
that time.
right.
Because
Just got off of 48.
Right,
they got
right,
called
no,
back
of course.
in.
Most of them will come back.
It wouldn't answer the phone.
Yeah, they're not.
So
Yeah, and then
can I
there's
ask
a
you a quick question? Sorry, Lisa from Art Packer. Have we looked at how often this has been needed in the past? Have you had patients that extubated on the way, needed reintubated? Have you had patients that your medics, have you had QI issues where it's come back to you to say, boy, I really could have used RSI on this transfer? I'm just curious to know.
I would have to say no.
Yeah. So, historically, just to look at when has the need occurred. And then the other thing is, if you have a very critical patient and you're thinking about transferring them for 2 hours or wherever, say to Rochester or whatever, do the flight crews ever go with you? Are the flight crews ever willing to come and go by ground? I know we have an agreement with Guthrie Air. We don't own them at all. They have our name, but the agreement is they come and ride with our trucks. So that kind of eliminates that need for us.
By and large, no.
The only
I
time
don't know if that's something we could look at doing
To be
though,
honest,
to
you
say,
can't go for it.
Yeah, the only time that I know that that's been offered is when they land and
Right.
they say we can't fly for some reason, or we won't fly this person, but we're willing to go with you.
right,
And
that's
But-
probably
but
the
there's
time.
never
Yeah, they
been
don't
any-
love it up there either. They don't like to do it, but
Feet on the ground.
it's right. Yeah, we can't go on the ground. Anyway, so just a few questions.
Is that something we can QI in some way, like we take it out?
I think we can run those reports.
The little issue is many RSIs are very subjective. So I will say that. Yes, you can meet certain parameters that XYZ patient should have, but a lot of it's very subjective, to be very honest with you. And that's hard to pin down from a QA standpoint.
And that would be very difficult to look retrospectively.
Yeah.
They couldn't see that.
It's not a
Good
box.
point, though. I mean,
Unless you had,
It's very
unless
valid.
you know of specific cases that we're going to say, we had this case, this is why we'd like to institute it, but otherwise, I think it's kind of a slippery slope.
I agree. We look at it prospectively in the future.
I think maybe a good idea might be is pull in a couple of the critical care paramedics and ask them why. And, what's
See if they have
what's-
examples.
Yeah, what's the benefits?
I would just want to say on it, that the coverage outside agencies weren't able to intubate because they were seizing or they needed intubation, and we did the RSI when they got there, but the short transports. But, I can definitely see the need. My concern is, what will they do when there's a fail that way?
Exactly.
Now they're paralyzed and they can't.
Exactly, so-
Are they gonna do a crike?
I agree with you 100%. That's why I say, okay, so take,
Or even LMA, you guys, they have LMAs?
We have the kings of the counties.
You have the kings, not LMAs.
Kings of the counties, yeah.
like in the case of the person that's seizing, okay, they're seizing. Well, then what you need to do is you need to stop the seizure. And if you give them enough drugs to stop the seizure and put them into a respiratory arrest, okay, now you got a crash airway. Go for it. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
Rescue
Yeah.
managers.
Ross, you want to say here? I
Well,
want to look at Jason's reading and
if
see
you
if
want to
they.
look at case studies, go to Melrose and go to Kimberley. Those two regions both have RSI programs. Personally, for years I have struggled with that issue in the field and can argue both sides of it pretty well. And I agree with all of you that said, A, how often do we do this? And what kind of skill set, frequency do we have in the day? I mean, in almost 30 years, I can count on one hand the amount of tubes that I've missed and have lots of fingers left over. But I'm one person. I was trained in what's different era and what's different. And the other thing is, and I'll say this point blank, you all know what I'm talking about, is there are a number of providers out there who will do things because they can,
Yes,
because they need to.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you
That
have
is
a
my-
hammer,
That is my biggest fear.
Yep, they can't wait.
Like Dr. Morrow said, a crashed airway is the perfect, but
You don't wanna
whose
get there.
version of crash meets that criteria?
They're pushing your hand away, it's not.
Well. But I get back over my career, the patients that I most often would have used this on are people that I'm not putting on CPAP and they're doing fine.
yeah.
You know? So, but just food for thought, if you want to look and see, because I know both of those regions, particularly Melrose and Jeremy, they've got a very tight rein on how it's done, when it's done, as tight as they can. Obviously, you're in the hospital and Joe paramedics out there doing the deed.
Do they limit it to their critical care medics?
They limit it to a very limited,
No,
it's
not
not even
necessarily,
that,
right.
it's specific providers that are recommended by their medical directors, and they go through a LSAP screening process and training, and then they are watched like this. And every one of those is reviewed by at least one physician, if not more.
This is definitely an issue that can't be determined in one meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like from what I've heard, at best, in order to consider this policy, we want to make a couple revisions based on what Brandon has suggested. We want to talk with our critical care paramedics and see if there's anything we can mine from the QA, QI data about opportunities where this would have been useful. I guess looking at our transport population would be the place to go, and then reaching out to our surrounding regions that do this and seeing what their experience is with it. And that sounds like the furthest we're willing to go on this at this time, and some of us may not even want to go that far. So I would like to make a motion to vote on, can we proceed with those 3 steps at this time?
So I'm comfortable with this as long as we leave in the agency director having to say yes.
And some of the wording there was specifically chosen for that. One of the regions said that the medical director had to assign the only people that he wanted, and it was 1 to 2 persons per
And
agency.
it can be 0 persons.
And it could be 0 if you want. If you don't trust the person, you don't like the person. And there are also criteria, the other places said that they had to be a medic for at least 5 years. They wanted them to be a CC for at least 2 years. Certain number of cases, we can set all of that on our own so that we're very selective. The point of the policy that I tried to outline is make it as restrictive as possible so that you tell them when not to do it. And if all the things are checked off when not to do it, the only thing that's left is to do it.
I mean, I could see if you had like a really bad trauma and it was very combative and you're not able to get things under control at all. I mean, I've taken people down, intubated them even with their good airway, just because.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I mean, I guess there's some other drugs you can use, but
Right.
besides intubate, you have a sequence, but. I found that to be the most effective myself.
I think most of the medics or people who've ridden in the ambulance before know that trauma patients can be very uncooperative, especially if gunshots are involved. And
Or head injuries.
yeah,
Better than for close head injury.
Yeah, and they're combative.
You gotta be careful what else you're gonna give them when they're knocking them down.
on the back of a moving ambulance isn't necessarily the best place to be fighting with that person.
So,
I'll make a motion to proceed with the
okay.
investigation. Start with that one.
Let's go.
All in favor of proceeding with the investigation steps?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I guess that carries too. On a more exciting note, it was brought up at the last meeting as part of the physician on scene policy and delineating how physicians in the field can help rather than hinder the care of patients, that we may want to develop EMS physician ID cards, or Mark wanted me to say badges. He would like us to have badges. Something that, you know, for the providers in the region that don't know the physicians on this committee, and maybe a few select other people that we delegate as able to give medical direction in the field, the same as if you called on the phone to ask for medical direction. And it seemed like last time around that was something that people were interested in. If that continues to be something that we think is a good idea, Rick, do you know how easily that can be done to produce ID cards for us, or badges, or?
There's already an ID card
Yeah,
template for
there is.
medical control positions. It's just that
So it
they've
can
never,
just be-
never been requested. So.
And we certainly, I know that Jim says we have some funding left, that we can spend the 50 cents or whatever per person to churn out those cards if we want to. So,
I think it's a good idea.
yeah.
Sure. You're saying the person at the scene that has that badge will supersede the other medical control now?
It would be equivalent to calling medical control
Okay.
at the hospital.
So they wouldn't call the hospital?
They would not have to call the hospital.
You trump the dermatologist.
That's the goal.
The ENT doctor.
I didn't say that.
PA.
Any potential downsides to doing this? And again,
Actually, it's,
I know if I'm at a scene, I'm not gonna have my badge with me. I'm not gonna gauge where I get to Walmart, you know.
you're not gonna pin it on your chest, little bronze star?
Well, we could, you know, maybe fork up for.
Tattoos?
Yeah, no, I like it.
Couldn't you put a picture of it on your phone even? You always have
There
your
you go.
phone.
There's the guy.
I mean, you could have your badge, but you also could have a picture and it's the same thing on your phone.
they're essentially a wallet. You
Yeah.
can just stick it in your wallet. It's not a badge that you have to clip to your shirt.
Yeah.
So.
But I think it's a valuable
It's like a
thing
credit
to
card.
have. And again,
That's
just
how I found through the pictures.
the people at this table for the moment, and if there's anybody else that we think should be given, I don't, it's certainly not going to be given out.
I think the policy states that any physician who's credentialed within the region as a medical control physician get that authorization. So if they have the card and they so desire to provide medical control when they're off duty, then they have that choice.
Well, that raises the other question about,
There's no duty.
how do we credential our medical control?
Well, there's a policy.
There's a policy.
There's a policy.
You approved it.
Now you gotta read it.
What did I just do?
In the past, we have taken tests.
Yeah, which I had a question about these. So, I mean, this is credentialing of agency medical directors. So, there are probably some of us who have been doing this a really, really long time and don't even remember
Taking
doing
tests.
this stuff.
Yeah.
For a number of volunteer ambulances that we said, sure, we would be the director, and we
Graciously.
do that stuff. That's my question. So is this for credentialing?
Are you asking if you were grandfathered in?
I'm just asking what I'm supposed to do. I mean, do I go back and check with everybody see if I have stuff on file? Or is this just for new people? That's my question.
It's for new people going forward.
Okay. All right.
So according
If you want to do it all, you
No,
can.
I'm not gonna, because it's like, I vaguely remember taking tests and stuff like that, but I don't really remember ever sending my CV to anybody. Maybe I did.
So looking through this protocol, according to our residents that aren't cannot give medical control. Correct? Because they don't have a diploma indicating successful physician
Actually,
medical specialty
so-
training.
But in the same way that they are providing care under your auspices while you are there supervising them, you are supervising them talking on the radio.
It's just like with nurses, it's the same thing.
Same thing, exactly. It's when we call it.
But the nurses, they don't do medical control. There's no
Correct,
medical
the
control.
physician's supposed to be listening.
So we can't have our third-year residents.
Technically, if you read, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, every radio contact is intended to be between physician and paramedic, not paramedic and nurse.
Correct.
So the assumption is when I'm talking to someone on the radio, I'm actually talking to a physician, but that's not rigidly adhered to because it's assumed that the physician is listening in.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it works.
Yeah, it works fine. It
Yes,
works great.
yeah, but so here's the thing, I don't know about, I'm sure there are hospitals under STREMAC who periodically use locums. So the locums person comes in, board certified in emergency medicine, blah, 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 but some of this stuff they haven't done because they just showed up.
Well, I've been locums in the past, and like up north, before you become available on duty, you are required to take the test. Even if you're credentialed in a different area, they want you to have gone through so that you in fact can do medical control. I don't know if that's done here as well when.
Not yet.
For me,
That was kind of my question, because sometimes it's like, somebody, an unanticipated thing happens, and all of a sudden,
Right.
you got somebody that is well qualified, but doesn't even know where the bathroom is yet,
Right.
and working in the ER.
For me, the important thing on medical physician is their familiarity with their protocols. So they know what we can do and know what we can't.
I think that is important in the same way that you have to, watch the infection control video before you're allowed to have credentials at the hospital.
Sure.
It's not unreasonable to say you have to be familiar with our protocols before you do that.
No, it's not, as long as we have kind of, and especially now, you have to download.
Right.
I have a question. Is the exam that they're talking about, is it online currently at the Kempston?
Is it still online, Mike, that protocol?
And when was it last revised?
It was the beginning of this year.
And what percentage of our current physicians in the area are compliant with that?
Other than our residents are compliant with it.
Although they still can't do it.
They still can't do it.
Yeah.
But at least they take it.
Yeah, so we're gonna need to vote that in
Yes.
because, years ago when I was the director, I made all the regular physicians take the test.
Right, I
I
remember.
kept it on file in my office. MSTAR never wanted it,
I remember going through that with all the docs that were on staff, making them take it.
Yeah, we just have to do that. I haven't done it in a long time.
I have a question, but on this online medical control, again, 3C, I'm not quite sure I understand. Must participate in CME pertaining to the protocols, including QA/QI, protocol updates, and any other information that's required by STREMAC. I'm not really sure what that means for the average regular doc who's just doing his or her shift.
I think what it, at least the
The way I
the
take
protocol updates, if there's any changes to the
Yeah.
protocols, that they have to be advised of the protocol.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the protocol changes.
And the way I take that is if there's some, something that comes out of QI that we want them to know about or whatever, or we want them to participate in, they have to be willing to follow it.
Oh,
They don't probably don't have to be on the QI committee.
right, that's, right, yeah, okay, all right.
So how do we, so we have a policy, we're
saying is you need to enforce it.
Yes.
And I agree, and there is some benefit of taking the test and making sure, the question how we got it, is we request once a year or something for what positions in each ER?
Yeah, I mean, like,
How do we go about tracking that?
well, number one and number two, I don't know that we have to do anything with number one or number two, because
Just the hospital
nobody
should
should
be
possibly get in there without having that stuff.
Well, what if they're in IRA and it's the only person on staff is a PA?
I don't know.
Do they have medical control at IRA?
If the visits are less than 15,000, isn't it, you do it?
They can be set by
Mid-levels can't do it.
But not according to this policy.
But at the hospital, when you only have a P or NP in the ED.
That's in the hospital.
But mid-levels can't
Okay.
provide medical control already. That's not a new thing that we've decided.
But I think it has something to do with your ED census.
So if you
Not to get the medical
That's
control
why-
over the radio, no.
Okay, then,
They can do what they want in the hospital, not a
But how do
problem.
they handle it then?
What's that?
How is it handled then for those, that, like IRA, their
They
census,
don't
and they
get
have,
medical control.
they don't answer and.
Well, sometimes,
They
like
do.
AMR,
They shouldn't be.
will call.
They give 102 and pass the ambulance.
All levels are?
The PAs up there. They
PAs?
don't have doctors up there.
Yeah, they don't
It's all
doctors,
PAs.
they have PAs.
Yeah, but we get
So that's the
calls.
local hospital up there, so
St. Joseph's
ALS
and
102, pass the ambulance, hands to her.
Yeah,
call.
But are those information only calls, or are they asking?
No, they've actually kept calling to get advice and.
Uh-oh, Ross is gonna explode.
Well, no,
No.
but you're also, I mean, I can speak, I'll
I mean,
get
a lot of them will
calls.
call Corning
I get
too.
calls from AMR all the time, we're taking a patient to noise, or we're taking. a
Well, yeah,
patient
because
to-
Cohocton and Noise will not give us back
Well,
control no
whatever.
matter what.
Which is-
Even if a doctor's there, they won't give us back control.
Yeah, with it.
So,
And and this may, it doesn't matter what the destination is. If physician, Charlie, if you're in over your place, and they're going to a different hospital, if you're comfortable giving them direction, that's fine. But.
Well, but he is also AMR's medical director, so, you know.
Right, if it's an AMR.
But if it's a mid-level at IRA, they have no business, legally, they cannot give medical direction to the
well,
paramedics.
that's good to know, because I didn't know that.
Tell your folks, don't bother calling if there's a mid-level on,
I
because
mean,
they can't.
I don't like,
I think you can do information calls, right? Or is that, no?
103
You
to
can do that.
Cohocton will call
Please don't show up.
Corning, because Noise
Depends
don't
on
give
how that
orders.
information's used.
Yeah.
No, I think what he means by information is
Like
that I'm
5 minutes
I'm
out.
5 minutes away.
No, this is
Yeah,
actually-
Patient report type things, yeah, who
Yeah.
cares?
No, this
But
is
they're
actually,
actually
Yeah, that's what
asking
we're talking about
permission
before.
to administer
To do any
medications.
of the-
Right.
Administer medications or stuff like that, that has
And they
to come
shouldn't be
from a
doing that.
physician.
Right.
And,
There's policy on
Which
it.
is why we have protocols.
Right.
But if you're asking for something below the red line of the protocol, you have to ask your doctor.
All right, so we will,
I guess that's a downfall for
Sure, we have
IRA.
to work on the exam. I suggest that, not make it a 50 or 100 question test, make it something, reasonable that people can be compliant with.
I thought we had.
we have the one that the medics took.
Yeah, we could just be doing this. That was protocol.
It sounds like
We can-
really all we need is this 3A, complete an EMS protocol, approved EMS, which we're gonna develop, and we're gonna.
We have
We have the medic
That's
protocol.
that's the new one,
Take-
based on the new.
Right, we will take the questions that we want out of there, put them together into a pretty format and put it online.
Because everything else, 1, 2, 3B, I mean, that's all on file in everybody's medical
Well,
schedules.
why can't we make it simple, so when you take it online, there's a record that you passed it online, so then you have it from it, rather than have to give a copy here or there.
This is just one time.
So one time, but then the 3C, with any updates, there has to be something that goes along with that.
Okay, so that
Yeah,
will be going out to us.
Right.
So we're gonna need to send correspondence out about this, once
Once you get
it's
the
online.
test.
But let's get it online, and we send a correspondence out and set a date of when it's required to be due by.
So it's gonna be a different test tailored to online medical control.
Yeah.
Skylar as well, they have just mid-level coverage a lot of times.
Make it
right?
simple, like what
So
button
they
you
can't,
push.
and they, I'm sure, I would guess, the control, they cover the right area.
Is there a reason to have 3C What's the
Protocol
first
that
participate in
they
the
test.
CME pertaining to blah, 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 and you're really not getting CME.
I honestly don't
In
know
general,
if Scott
it could be
uses for
reworked.
that control. I think this Scott also giving that control to the ambulance, like
Right, which is, we're gonna be something that should be giving, medical court data.
I guess I have a question for
Yeah, can I just call
clarification in
down
my
now?
own mind. If EMS is calling into a emergency department that's staffed by mid-levels, then they're giving a report, that's fine. But if they need medical control, who do they call?
For us,
What
like,
route they're on.
for like getting water, it'd be California Hospital.
Okay, so, I mean, just so you have a
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
so everybody's on the same
I think
page.
Skylar would have to call in, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, or Cuba Medical Center, because they're part of.
Yeah,
but
but
I think it depends on who the medical.
But then there's a
Or
okay,
St.
so take for
Most
example,
time,
Bath,
St. James.
Mhm,
Bath ambulance, okay? I'm not their medical director,
mhm.
okay? Corning Hospital has nothing to do with Bath ambulance, I have nothing to do with Bath ambulance.
Can I save you on this one?
Yes.
That ambulance is a BLS ambulance, and there's nothing that
They would
there's
be
nothing
called
that they
in.
can request that would require a physician.
Yeah.
I think
It's
once
all,
we
it's
have,
all
Supposed to be
BLS
BLS.
level skills.
What about Skylar ambulance? Because they're
Skylar
out
ambulance,
of
they-
I think once we have,
But they're out of our county.
once we have this test set up and we have.
No, they're in our
No,
region.
there's
Well,
no-
Skylar would,
Just the region.
yeah, but
That's
Skylar would
different.
call us if they were coming, and then, then we could give them advice.
Yeah, but if they're
So
going
the
to
reason they
Skyler,
would call
if they're
us.
going to Skyler Hospital,
That's
They wouldn't call us.
MFPs generally.
Yeah, they wouldn't call Corning if they were going to Skylar, but Skylar.
I'm
But I
just
think-
asking for that clarification from STREMAC, so
that's
everyone
something you gotta carry
knows
back to Skyler.
what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, that's what I think is what we do. Once we have this test and people start taking the test, then we can put out a memo to all the agencies saying, these are the hospitals that you can get medical control from. It doesn't matter where you're going, these are the ones you get medical control from.
Because I know, like, when you're transporting to Rochester, depending on where you're at,
No, because it's how
Always
much
have
time
to,
they
if
may
there's
have
a
a
physician or
physician
facility transfer, you have to
to
contact the
do
hospital.
that. I mean,
right,
It's
but I
kind
know
of
there's
does,
been
yeah.
situations
I
where
mean,
you're
there's
not
always
able to
the
reach
option
them
of,
and
if
had to
the
call
agency's
Strong.
medical director or assistant medical director wants to be on call to give medical control, that's fine too. That there are other options than just picking a regional hospital.
Right.
But so
I
I
think there's occasionally, a person they can call that first and then ask. Like,
I mean, there's nothing that prevents any of you guys from giving medical control to
Let somebody else.
a unit going somewhere else in the emergency system, except your level of comfort.
Right.
You have the option.
But so I think one of the things that we will come to the next meeting with is we'll have our protocol test done, we'll have a draft of a memo done that we can send out to everybody. And then we can continue refining this process in a way that makes us all comfortable. I think, at least at present, the policy stands as written because we all voted to approve the policy without reading the policy. And we've gotten away from the question of physician ID cards, which I think is a pretty simple question. And we're running pretty long right now. So, is there a motion to approve creating ID cards for medical control physicians?
Yeah.
Is there a second for that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries too. New business, a few important issues. First of all, not on the agenda, James, you brought up the question of Medicaid shopping by ambulance agencies.
I just wanted to get the clarification of you guys who deal with this is, and so we can pass it along for everybody, is with transports now, there's Medicaid, they shop around or something, what's going on?
Well, what it is, no, they're not allowed to
Yeah,
separate.
well,
They're
they
not allowed
do
to.
it. They do it. We had this problem.
Oh, I know, I'm not saying
We
they
had
don't
this
do it.
problem. We had AMR couldn't do it, so we called Irway. And Irway was gracious to come over and do it. And then Medicaid said, no. We got, I don't know, we're gonna call Skylar. And then like, Skylar can be there in an hour, and they're like, so that's like.
Do you, and honestly, Charlie, with that one, it delayed your transfer of your patient by 15 minutes, because I had a crew who was gonna be there. After the meeting, off the record, I'll have a sit down conversation with you and explain it to you.
Well, I think, if you have an emergent transport, like I had a knee dislocation that I couldn't get in, the orthopedist couldn't get in, and we're no vascular compromise, and and we're shopping around trying to figure out how to get patients.
Technically, it doesn't require an approval. If you say this is a life or limb emergency, there's no approval process that's required.
Okay, good.
If it's a life or limb emergency though.
Well,
So now we're always told, Rick, that if it's Medicaid, you don't turn a wheel till pre-op is in place or anything.
No,
That's
it's,
insane.
our policy at Airways is if it's a life or limb, but it literally has to be a life or limb threatening emergency, we don't require the approval process.
Obviously something, gym or something.
Yeah.
They've always made it clear, we don't turn a wheel unless pre-op.
It creates more hassle on the back end getting the reimbursement, but if it's a life or limb emergency, it's a life or limb emergency, so.
That's the right thing to do, obviously. The trouble is sometimes the particular agency will get stiff.
Yeah, and we just don't want people to start thinking, well, I can just tell them it's a life or limb emergency, because it does create such a huge problem on the back end getting reimbursement for this. But if it's a true life or limb emergency, the number one priority is getting the person where they need to go. But, and then we'll deal with the back end stuff afterwards, but we don't want to have to deal with the back end stuff afterwards unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. I guess the biggest thing when you said about shopping, like yesterday, we get a phone call, transfer out of Arnett going to Strong. I asked, did Airways cancel it or turn it down? She says, no, they just want to discuss higher payment. Like, they didn't turn it down, it's their CON area.
Medicaid?
Yeah. I'm like, so we can't take it, it's their CON area, and they have the right to negotiate if they want.
It required a custom rate because the patient was so large, it was going to require multiple crews.
Which happens from any of us. If you gotta send 2 full crews to move a patient, you're losing 2 full crews. And then she called back like half hour later, tried to tell us same thing. And then when my dispatcher questioned, she said, well, they did turn it. He said, well, let me call Airways. He called Nikki. Nikki says, no, we haven't turned nothing. Called, told Medicaid, nope, we're not taking nothing. It's still Airways up.
Elvis on paper.
Huh?
Send it to the Attorney General.
So here's my concern, so you have a policy, it's great, if it's life or limb, then you just go.
You just go.
Can we put that out as a region, like, we enforce that on our EMS agencies, that if it's really life or limb?
The problem is you're just not dealing with public health law, you're also dealing with CMS, the Centers for Medicaid, for Medicare and Medicaid, and their own file cabinet full of
They dictate the patient
requirements
care.
and stuff like that. But, if it's true life or limb, it just boils down to you take the patient and then we deal with all the stuff afterwards. But it has to be a true life or limb emergency.
But you can't pass that policy, you can't pass that policy directly because AMR is telling you that they can't until they get released.
Well, that may be something that can be changed, discussing it with Tom and Jim and them. My issue is there's been a lot of times I've been told it's a standard emergency transfer, and we get down there and it's a toothache.
Yeah, we got that.
Right.
So, don't lie to me.
Yeah.
That's broad.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, don't lie, just get us there.
Well, no,
So it
sometimes
sounds like-
it's more ignorant. It's not that it's cost control.
It sounds like what we need is a mechanism for reporting on both sides if it was either an inappropriate refusal or an inappropriate emergency. And I think that, James, does that address your concerns?
Yeah, I think so. I think I can definitely see the other end of things too, where it's not, my concern is that, you're gonna be an outlying facility and they have this emergency, get out of there, and they're told that, and there's this delay, and it really is a life and limb, and that, the patient's the one that's getting hurt and from this.
So I
Maybe
think
the physician, maybe their physician isn't a strong enough advocate for the patient getting that.
I can tell you what Medicaid uses as a rule of thumb for what they consider an emergency. And it is if the taking of the 20 minutes to receive approval for this transport will cause a negative effect to the patient's life. That's what they consider. They say, well, 20 minutes make a difference.
So there is that
That's what I've been verbally told.
Even though it
And that's the
costs
reason.
more than 20.
So in my specific case with his knee,
Takes 20 minutes.
I got the approval from Strong, I thought the transfer was coming, and then the Strong physician, asked me, I got on the phone, he's like,
what do you mean that there's this delay in transfer? What's going on? Like, what do you mean? I thought the transfer was going fine.
Yeah.
But the nurse had told them that there was this delay in transfer. Nobody told me that there was a delay in getting the patient out of there. I thought they were, already, getting ready to go.
Yeah, no.
So it's just not.
I would suggest that this is something that this committee should take on as a continuous review process, and that if there are instances, and again, we can disseminate this out to all the agencies and all the hospitals, and if there are instances where this is seeming to occur, we as a body should be reviewing them and determining what was done appropriately or not, making recommendations and forwarding concerns up to higher levels in the state, because I think that we as a body have more legs to stand on to do that than on an individual case-by-case physician basis.
I agree.
I agree with that.
Then we probably ought to have some sort of a policy that states.
We have to start
Protocol.
reviewing, we have to start reviewing those, the agencies have to start bringing specific examples with details to
Yeah,
commit.
So- I think
If we have a policy in place about life or limb and a certain amount of acceptable delay.
That helps. We're in the middle of creating a policy in conjunction with the ARNet on emergent transfer.
That would be perfect, because then we have a leg to stand on. This is our policy procedure, and you're failing or you're not complying with, despite reimbursement or what have you, just as we have to take. In the emergencies, everybody walks in, whether they're emergent or not, and at least
Yeah,
we have
it's not going
screening.
to come up that often.
From what I've seen, the biggest hang-up comes from the confusion of both sides not knowing what the responsibility of the other side is when they're dealing with this.
Yep.
So hopefully coming up with the policy that I'm working with, creating with the ARNet on emergent transfers and non-emergent transfers, that actually, so both sides understand the process of getting someplace from point A to point B, because it's not always just throwing the person on the stretcher and getting them out of there. A lot has to do with, the safe transfer of the patient, making sure that you have the appropriate, there are times, and I hate to say this, I hate to say this, but there are times where you pick specific paramedics to take specific transfers, because you're picking the paramedic on their skill level.
Sure.
Someone that if something goes downhill, that's the paramedic that you want to be in the back of the ambulance when that patient goes downhill. So, and that creates certain delays and there's stuff like that. And then there's also all the reimbursement stuff, because you can't do this for free, or there's going to be nobody to do it at all.
Right.
So it has to be a balancing act between the two, and hopefully some good communication between both sides, so that everybody understands the issues on both sides. You can come up with a good middle ground and get these people as fast as you possibly can where they need to go.
So Rick, will your policy, you think, be ready by our next meeting date that we can?
God knows.
You can try.
Do we have meetings for next year?
Well, we're getting to that.
Okay.
A couple more meeting agenda items first, but yes. So we'll circle back to this at our next meeting. In the meantime, Rick is hopefully working on this policy, and it'll hopefully be ready by that time, but if it's not, we'll make do. And I'll put together something to send out to agencies and hospitals saying, please send us information on these. And as we develop the policy, what we want more specifically. Sound good? Stop the bleed.
Stop the bleed. I hope everyone here in the room is familiar with Stop the Bleed. Everyone's nodding their heads.
I want to ask you something.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, those of you that aren't, I'll just pass this around. This, just a synopsis, this came about from the American College of Surgeons as a result of Sandy Hook and the Boston Marathon, and they found that there were patients that sanguinated and probably could have survived if someone knew how to stop the bleed. Of course, everyone in this room knows how to do it, but this is mostly focused towards the community. So as a result of this, they have put together training and the instructor courses, and you can take it out in the community, and equipment has been made available to teach this. Primarily, you can see what it is as far as tourniquets and how to really pack a wound. That's what it really centers on. Mike has the equipment right there, because I've already taken a look at it.
After the meeting.
We presented this to the council in November, and the council totally embraced this. We had the funds, according to Jimmy, that we would be able to purchase 2 of the training kits, would be stationed in each EMO office, So once we have the instructors available, they could just borrow this and go out and teach it at barbecue, the church, wherever they want to. So that is probably the most up-to-date. Oh, wait a minute, Brandon and Mike just presented this and did it, the training with the police cadets. And you can speak to how that went.
It went really well. It really did. We brought a couple kits. We brought some homemade legs. So we brought formal legs that are in the kit, but we also made legs out of foam rollers, a real cheap alternative. It went really well. They're a target audience. I mean,
Only because it has a tactical aspect.
and they love it, right? So if you here's something more you can put on your belt.
Pin his back and
Right.
get
Well,
Yeah,
and then
so-
there was a state trooper that saved his own life.
Yeah,
when he
so
was
we
trying to
brought,
get out
yeah,
and get
PA state
shot.
trooper
Yeah.
saved his own life, and a good majority of them are military based, so they already understand that. And good news is, a lot of them said, oh, we've already kind of had a little bit of this, but not nearly as formal, or the officers that they know or ride with have kind of planted the seed with them as well. A couple of them said, yeah, the one guy I rode with, he carries his own, or I know. So they're hearing it and they're getting it little by little. They had a great time with it, but they, sadly, we see what's on the news. They're a prime
Well, and then
audience
after
for that.
Vegas,
Yeah.
it became even more, I guess, urgent. And
And-
then luckily, the company that makes them is in Herkimer, New York.
Right.
So we had a really good turnaround. The orders have really become increased since the last event. So, but because where we're located, we're able to get them a little sooner, I think, than others. But Dylan brought up a good point about comparing the eBay version of the tourniquet as the cat, the official cat tourniquet. And so we don't want to, like we said, we make some homemade legs, but we don't want to encourage the community to go out on eBay or Amazon or whatever, buying the cheap versions because they're not going to really work.
Yep.
At the same time we presented that, I'm sorry. At the same time we presented that, the director of the academy asked us to do another presentation. We're going to do it for all the CEOs and the command staff with the local law enforcement agencies in the 3-county area. And we're working through to schedule that for probably sometime in January. And actually, I believe Bill Hallinan from U of R is going to come down and help us with that. So we're hoping to present to those guys and get the buy-in from them. And then see if there's a little bit of trickle down from that.
And
It was the who? So again,
So this is your law enforcement academy.
Okay.
And the current instructors, Mike and Brandon, a couple more folks from Steuben County, all of our residents have been trained.
How long, was the training to be,
Yeah,
to teach?
Training to teach will take what, 10 minutes?
15 minutes.
10, 15 minutes tops.
I remember when they came in and did it. Wait, is it now spot?
Yes, you were. Yes.
Guess what, now you can teach.
Yeah, I think if you are instructed anything before and you have the background, I think you're a suitable person.
Yes.
The program, I mean, we've rolled it out to kind of people with some relation, but really, as you look at the program, it really is lay person.
Yes.
Going out to a crochet group, or the Rod and Gun Club,
Yes.
or,
The church group.
right, or the guy that uses a chainsaw day in and day out. Those are the target audiences.
There is nothing in this that would be a surprise to anybody in this room.
Right, it's,
No.
There is, you could teach the course now without any additional training,
You just
if
have
we
to
need
look
a
at the
little
picture.
lesson.
Hey Lisa, isn't that the same course you just had a concept of trauma?
Yes,
Yeah.
so you
Yep.
were instructed, we did, yeah.
But I think that this is a very valuable thing.
One of the things, we brought this up at the regional trauma committee meeting last week or a week or so ago, and they were quite impressed that we have embraced it and taken and ran with it because of everything that we've done. And actually, Bill Hallinan asked if we could just write it up and submit it to the American College of Surgeons because we've really expanded on it down in this region, more so than they anticipated. And I know a church group asked us yesterday if we would, because they're going to do an active shooter, the church group is. And so they asked us to come and show them how to stop the bleed. It was like, okay, so we volunteered, we said we'd go.
right, and it's probably in response to that text you sent.
Yeah, so we're going to the church to do
I
it.
think the bottom line is, this is a wonderful thing that's going on in our region. Mary Ann, thank you so much for spearheading this.
Yeah, something we did.
Gotcha, thank you.
The entire program is in this little booklet, so I mean, it's not a complex program. Our approach has been to provide it to the agencies first, because they're not embracing their role in EMS. And what we're trying to do is convey to them that they have a big role, they are the first responder, You know, there was a couple studies done, as I'm sure you're all aware, that the outcomes do not change when the police transport versus, you know, the best ALS unit. There's no outcome difference. And they do respond. They do respond, so they need to be aware of these sorts of things. That's why we're approaching it from that direction right now. We're also making ourselves available, of course, we're doing it to the library on Friday. So we're getting everywhere, but we want the Leos in the area to embrace this.
And I just ask anyone that does it to please use the attendance sheet, because you fax it to the American College of Surgeons, so that, because obviously they're accumulating the data to see where it's being rolled out and who's attending. And that's on the website. It's the website's very, very easy to use, bleedingcontrol.org.
If you hear anything about groups wanting to do this and you want to teach it yourself, again, it's very easy to get certified.
And we have
There are
equipment.
kits available. MSTAR's got a kit. All the 911 centers are getting kits.
Yeah, we haven't got them yet, but.
Jimmy's going to order it.
And instructors are available either through ARNET or through the council. You have something else to add, Brandon?
Yes, my paramedics will all get it next week in class. And one of my students, she's also an instructor, she's bringing, apparently you can make very inexpensive simulation bleeding things. Just battery powered, she's already made a couple.
It's very MacGyver.
Very MacGyver, we're gonna put it outside because it does actively bleed.
I
It
think
actively spurts blood.
When we
So-
use non-American College of Surgeons equipment, we just
Right.
have to mention that.
Sure, okay.
Because this is the approved
Right.
teaching equipment, but other people have become quite creative.
Yeah.
They use PVC pipes and sponges and all sorts of things. So you just have to mention that.
How much does that cost?
The kit, the training kit, that's $950 plus $75 shipping and handling. However, the Upstate bought all of the Stop the Bleed kits, and the goal is to have them adjacent to the AED out in the public.
Not the training kits.
I'm talking about the training. I'm talking
No,
about
the training kit is
training.
$950.
Charlie, a lot of
I
the
think
money, I think you could
We've
get by
already
on
made
a
up our
lesser
own kit.
budget, yeah.
This is the one they want on the wall.
Right.
No, there's a bigger one that goes on the wall.
Well, yeah, this is the single, this is the
Yeah.
bare minimum they want on the wall. There's also, that's a
That's the big
multi-pack.
one, yeah.
The big
These are
training kit is about
plastic
$900. The money comes in these, they're proprietary made, like leg to practice.
The mold.
In the mold. That's, I think, what
The
the
mold
money
and the
is.
case, I think,
So
is
you
where
can
you're
get
paying
by,
for.
you know, kind of making some things on your own. But yeah, it might not be ACS approved.
Right,
but
just mention that.
You can do it on a
You can be
shoestring budget
creative,
if
totally.
you had to.
Yeah, you can guess it right.
PHLS, and the guy brought me shoes,
Mary,
pork shoulder
did they say
roast.
something about
We had-
DNA?
That's what it is now.
Yes, the New York State
Yeah, I'm gonna
DNA
add-
is going to
That's
award
why people
a training kit to every New York State
Why we use
chapter.
marinade while we're doing it? It's not real blood.
So that will be rolled out in January. Yeah, we got a lot of money, we saved a lot of money on shipping and handling since the company is
Okay.
in New York.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next agenda item. He's been waiting the whole meeting to talk. From Steuben County, I was approached by their 911 center with an agency that is interested in offering ALS level care, but is unable to offer ALS level care consistently 24/7. And this is not something that's currently allowed in our region. And I asked Tim for some additional information to determine what kind of need there was for that. And I'll let him take it from there.
So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim Marshall. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Steuben County. I'm also serve as the EMS coordinator by default, because we wear many hats when you work for Steuben County. But anyways, several months ago, I was approached by the legislature as well as the county manager to take a look at EMS in Steuben County. It was one of my goals for this year, but certainly we've been having some difficulties with getting services out the door. This is part of a PowerPoint presentation that I did for them, for the legislature, and I also did it for the EMS captains and chiefs back a few months ago. But it kind of gives you some breakdown of Steuben County itself. on page 3 there, we've got 64 CFRs, according to the State Department of Health records for individuals registered in Steuben County. 64 CFRs, 285 EMTs, 6 critical care techs, and 50 paramedics. So in Steuben County, we have 22 total agencies. There's 20 volunteer agencies, 1 paid agency, which is AMR, and then also the City of Cornell Fire Department provides ALS services out of the City of Cornell. So out of those transporting agencies, there are 2 agencies currently right now that are volunteer agencies that they're doing staff leasing. Bath and Cohocton are doing staff leasing. Bath is staff leasing through AMR, and Cohocton is in the process of transitioning to Yates County, which is actually the ALS service that runs out of Penn Hospital, out of the Finger Lakes Health group up there. So basically, the overall numbers, we get around between 10.5 to 11,000 EMS calls a year. Out of those calls, 608 of those calls are handled by the primary agency, or 5.75% in 2016. And out of 2017, our numbers got worse. It went from that 354, which is 6.78%. So the graph here in the middle, this graph, shows you statistics between 2016 and 2017. Your 2016 numbers are on the left, 2017 numbers are on the right. And this is percentage of calls handled by the primary agency, based upon, and then when they have to go to mutual aid. So we're getting to the point of where we're seeing the agencies are transferring their calls to other agencies more often. It's putting a very tremendous effort on the paid service and the contract staff lease services who have full-time people on during the day. So AMR, Bath Ambulance, who has a staff lease person on during the day. Cornell's kind of an oddball in this because Cornell's policy is we will only come out and transport patients that are coming back to St. James because they don't want to be out of their service area. Because they're funded by the city and their primary area is the city, they don't want to go out and pick up a patient in Greenwood and take them to the Arnett. They want to come back to St. James, bring the patient there, and if they got to take the transport to Strong, they'll coordinate their crews and do that. So the discussion overall really kind of went, how do we look at changing our service delivery model? We've talked about regionalization, we've talked about shared services, we've talked about contracts and various things like that. Certainly, we understand the small town pride that goes with some of these volunteer EMS agencies. The fire-based EMS agencies that's always been in town for forever, and we don't charge our people anything for coming out and providing that service. But when you're turning over 30% or 40% or 50% of your calls to another agency, you're not meeting the service of that community. The biggest thing is that the agencies that are staff leasing are beginning to, or have been, basically able to bill for services. So by being able to bill, they have revenue coming in and they're able to pay for that staff leasing. So in the process of discussing this, a couple of those agencies came to me and said, what if we were able to provide during that staff leasing period, if we were able to provide that as a paramedic or an ALS level of care versus what we're doing right now with just staff leasing an EMT. And that was kind of my direction, and that's why I came to Dylan and said, you know, what's the possibility of this occurring? So that, because right now, as I say, Bath Ambulance is staff leasing with AMR. AMR could put a paramedic there just as easy as they can put an EMT there. Or, you know,
Well,
sometimes.
it would cause the staff leasing agreement to go up.
Right, certainly the staff leasing,
Yeah.
that's gonna change, certainly it's gonna change.
How would that affect the CON though?
Well, I mean, they will,
No?
well,
So say it's like
they would have-
55 for the
they would
medic.
have to change from a BLS to an ALS agency,
But that's not a CON.
but not part of the CON.
No, I'm saying like,
Right.
say AMR has the CON for ALS first responders for Benton County.
That's first response, it's not
No,
transport.
I'm just saying, but then, a medics get put a CVAS during the day, that's not AMR, obviously. Can they run paramedic calls outside of Cohocton? You know, like if they get called to say,
They run paramedic
Wayland,
calls.
say they get called to Wayland, now they're an ALS transporting agency out of Wayland, which we have,
Mutual aid.
Through mutual aid.
Mutual aid.
Just like AMR is doing now for
Yes.
some of
Two
the
is gonna throw a fit.
So basically the numbers on the last page, are the Bath ambulance numbers, specifically. The level of Charlie Delta Echo, or Bravo Charlie Delta Echo, and the Alpha, as you can see, the Alpha level calls are really the bread and butter of what they're carrying. It's probably the same way across most agencies. You know, but it shows you the percentage of calls that are handled. The one page is 2016 complete, and the other one is 2017 up to the end of November. So they're going to be pretty much on target. Actually, they're going to be over as far as responses for 2017 from what they did in 2016. But you know, that's really kind of what we're looking at, is how do we look at changing
I can give you
our
the
model.
history of the 24/7 rule. The history of the 24/7 rule it was for consistency and to avoid confusion. So I think if we can defeat the avoid confusion and we can meet the consistency, I don't think that there's an issue. What I mean by consistency is that before it was, well, we want to be ALS, but we only want to be ALS when this paramedic, when this advanced provider was available. So we're talking like, you know, I'll just use Tuscarora as an example. Tuscarora, we have a paramedic that lives in our area, and when she can answer calls, she will, and at that time will run an ALS service. There's no consistency in that.
Right.
And also, it's to avoid confusion. If there was an ambulance service that's ALS Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., there's consistency to that, but there's no consistency to a volunteer paramedic that says, well, when I'm not at Walmart shopping, I can come and be your ALS provider. There's no consistency to that. So that's why the blanket 24/7 rule was put into effect years ago, is because there has to be consistency there, because you can't be paging someone out assuming that you're going to be paging out an ALS truck, and then 5 minutes later when the truck responds, you find, lo and behold, you find out it's a BLS truck. Now I've got to get an ALS unit running, so, and that ALS unit's 5 minutes behind the ball. So I think that there's consistency, and where the consistency really has to be known is it has to be known in the communication center, so that they know that they can get the proper resources going in an appropriate amount of time.
Well, and possibly at that point in time, we might not even have been a 911 county. We probably still had 7 dispatch centers at that point in time.
And
But,
so,
you know, we've had 911 for 12
and
years.
that could lead to the confusion, but in my personal opinion, I mean, if you can defeat the confusion and you can meet the consistency, there's no reason that someone shouldn't be ALS if they can be.
And again, these agencies that would be probably most likely looking at this would be agencies that would be probably staff leasing or, you know, scheduling their people for specific time frames, whether it's 12-hour blocks or whatever. It would probably most likely be that it's not gonna be, well, whenever I'm available. Certainly, we know that, you know, the paramedic training is geared more toward the paid services rather than the volleys. You know, we're having a heck of a time trying to find anybody to take an EMT class in a volunteer agency. I don't see anybody in a volunteer agency wanting to go out and get their paramedic just so that Jasper Ambulance can go out and run ALS calls. I think that if they're gonna go out and get their paramedic, they're gonna wanna run with an agency like AMR or Irway or Skyler, or an agency like Bath, that's running, you know, 2,500, 3,000 calls a year. You know, but that's, I was asked to bring this forward to you to consider, to take a look at, whether this would be a possibility. And again, using the 911 center as the point of contact, knowing whether an ALS or a BLS agency is in staff. It's being done across the state and other regions. I know Finger Lakes immediately to our north is doing it now.
CNY does too. Yeah, such a nerd.
The other concern that I have is maybe unfounded is this is a policy that is going to allow BLS agencies to step up to ALS level. But does this open the door for ALS agencies to step down to BLS level at certain times, and therefore we wind up overall for the region providing fewer hours of ALS service?
I think that's a legitimate concern. It's a very legitimate concern. Because there is a certain that 24/7 rule does put a certain amount of responsibility on the ALS agencies to stay ALS 24/7.
I was never happy with that rule around here. I'm gonna tell you something, that the 18 regions around the state,
Well, we're the only ones.
off the top of my head, I can't think of another one that has a rule like that. I sort of understand how it was based, but I think that in some respects you've shot yourself in the foot. Right? Because you're missing some ALS opportunity that's being ruled out. I get the consistency part, and you need to know. 911 needs to know. But I'm going to tell you that the state of EMS in this region and in other regions around the state, similar to this, is exactly what Tim says. They're not getting out the door. You're banging out 5 agencies at once and hoping one of 2.5 ALS agencies can show up with ALS. You know, I think that if you want to meet consistent, here's the thing. ALS practice in any region is at the behest of you guys and your counterparts. So you can set criteria. An agency that wants to provide ALS should be submitting to you their plan. Some of that should be a staffing plan on what they propose that they should be able to. Like you said, you're not going to see Tuscarora and Swan play ALS. You're not going to see, you might see anyone else trying to play ALS, but that's another story. But they have to be able to, in my mind, certainly this is your bailiwick when it comes to approving it, they have to show that they can, with some regularity, provide ALS. I think by saying 24/7 or nothing, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting the people in this community. My opinion. So think about that. Like I said, I agree that there should be, in their submission, there should be some sort of, this is how we plan to do it. You know? And even if they're not paying for staff, if they have a staffing plan that can show some regularity or some consistency to when they'll be available as ALS. They also need the status with 911. And the other concern that is always there is, these are part-time ALS guys. But I said, I can tell you that most of the people that would be providing that ALS are already working on a paid service. They're not, I can count, I wouldn't have any fingers to put down for the amount of paramedics, particularly, that are purely volunteer, except for me.
I don't think you're ever going to find Joe the farmer who wants to become a paramedic just so he can run with the local.
He may want to, but he doesn't have time or money to do
But
it.
he doesn't have the ability to do it.
Right.
You
Well, what level ALS would you be approving? I mean, like, say you brought up Woodhall, at one point in time, they were intermediate only.
Right.
You know?
Well, we used to have quite a few intermediates. Because almost 60 Hammondsport was intermediate too for a while, I think. But
I'm saying with like the new AEMT class that Brandon's teaching, that's a little bit of ALS. So is it going to be ALS that level or ALS paramedic only for consistency?
Well,
If you look at if you look at the curriculum and what they can cover.
Our definition, I say our DLH, is anything above BLS.
Right. If you look at the way that curriculum is designed and the way the collaboratives also sit, you hit at least, what, 60% of any given call? So I think people are balking at the whole AEMT level, but it's not a bad level, you know?
No, the issue I got, if you give a drug, you can't monitor it without a cardiac monitor. They won't do that. That's my issue.
But if cardiac monitoring doesn't change your treatment plan, then.
There's a lot of things that you need
So-
cardiac monitoring once you start giving drugs.
What do some of the physicians who've been in the region longer than I have think about this?
One of the concerns I would
No, I
have,
think it's been a great.
I don't know, it's not been happening for a while now, but for a while, years ago, consistently, there were some ambulances that would take calls that should be ALS, and for whatever reason, just bring them to BLS because they could, and because I think they thought it was cool, or whatever. I don't know.
Well, there was a town at one time, that actually had a town law that said ALS was not allowed in their town.
You can't make this stuff up.
Which town was this?
Soboka.
So, you know, I don't want to go back to those days where, you know, and then it's like, okay, well, now I have to
There's
talk
still
to
houses
the
up there
medical
that have
director
signs.
of that
Rural Metro not
volunteer
allowed.
ambulance.
Even though rural metro's not, no.
just to add a little bit more insight to it, you know, again, with Bath Ambulance being a large, active provider in the area and being a volunteer-based agency, they have individuals that are paramedics that would like to join their agency, but they want to practice at the paramedic level. And they don't want to go and just run as an EMT. And so they're cutting out a portion of the volunteers that could come and run with them by limiting them to a BLS-only agency.
I think it's easy in Bath to have a staff leasing and have it's not so much a concern from the care perspective on a Bath type agency. I think for me, the concern is the smaller ambulances that maybe run, you know, 20 to 50 ambulance runs a year. And I'm not saying they're the ones that are going to do that, but, you know, it's 911 really needs to be aware of when they are an ALS agency and when they're not an ALS agency, because especially with the longer times it takes for ambulances to get on the road in the rural areas, you could have a paramedic fly car coming from somewhere long before that ambulance gets on the road. And so at least some sort of definitive ALS care is en route, but now, well, are they ALS or not they ALS? Well, we're going to wait to dispatch the fly car till the truck gets on the road, and if they don't have ALS, to me, it's all about the timing and making sure that the appropriate person gets to the patient as quickly as possible. But I'm all for whoever wants to be ALS, if they can do it consistently and without confusion.
Well, I think
then go for it.
I think that's another point. I mean, an agency that only runs 50, 60 calls a year probably is not going to invest the money that they have to put into becoming an ALS
That would actually be a
agency.
cheap venture for them.
It's no, you know,
If
I mean,
somebody's willing to do that, invest that kind of money. my
but an
guess is
agency
they're-
like Bath could potentially do it and do it correctly, because they're a large enough agency with a large enough call volume that they could do it.
I've been spoiled with. Our moms come from Pennsylvania. You know, our region, the ones that initially from like this. That was in our region.
I mean, it sounds like this is a door that we are not opposed to opening. It's a matter of how far do we want to open this door? Because as unlikely as it is that the 50 call a year crew is going to say we want to go into ALS business on Monday evenings, I don't know that we want to create a policy that will allow them to offer 1 day a week ALS. I think that that's bad for our patients.
A great opportunity for you to create your first tag. And actually come up with some sort of,
Oh, look at that, the meeting's over.
Minimum guideline.
come up with a minimum guideline
Right.
of what is required for you to be an ALS service. And in that should be that you can provide this on a consistent level. And consistency doesn't have to be 24/7. It could be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You know, and you can do it without confusion. And the confusion I mean is that the 911 centers are always apprised of
Yes.
what your skill level is at.
Don't get me wrong, this isn't something that our agencies are looking to do tomorrow. This is a very, very, very preliminary, and Dan, this is a very, very preliminary discussion level. Yeah, nobody's set to move forward on this tomorrow, you know, because I know for you guys, it's a big concern because you are the primary ALS agency in the county. But
it's like if Bath was to go ALS, I can see people above me with concerns, because 60%, 70% of our call volume is the village of Bath for 102. We will lose the 102 ALS car out of that area,
But
because you won't be able to feasibly pay for it. to be
But
there.
I feel, as the EMS coordinator for the county and the call volume that I see and listen to and the shuffling of resources every single day, there is enough call volume to be able to support additional ALS service in the county, without a doubt.
There are a lot of factors behind this that have to be factored.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's more than just what we're talking about is consistency and availability and ability. There's also what is going to be the unintentional side effects of allowing this to happen. And all that needs to be looked at as well, like Dana's saying too. You know, if they lose 60% of their call volume, then that 102 flight car is going to go away, and now you've lost ALS after 5 p.m. Right. But then you've lost ALS for 24 hours for all the towns surrounding that. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to be looked into.
Other thoughts, comments about this?
Well, it sounds like there's a shortage. What would happen if they went to a shared service plan where strategically through your county there was various places where there were people who had fly cars and ALS, and then we contract with each ambulance service to provide services for them so that they'd always have ALS. I'm just thinking
Right.
out of the box as to
See,
how
that
you
makes
solve
sense,
your
but that's a whole
problem.
COI issue.
Well, look,
So be it.
so
So you create something new.
one of the things that the county is looking at doing is we want to develop a comprehensive study of EMS in Steuben County. You know, with 20 to 21 agencies, some ALS, some BLS. We really need to look at the county, the model, and how this is going to be done. Certainly, there has been discussion about, you know, the potential someday there may be a county level entity that is running some sort of service like they're doing in Livingston County now. But the county itself is not ready to bite that up. You know, let's take a look at it, let's do a study, see if we can, right now we're trying to talk them into self-merger and combination of shared services. That's what we're trying to get them to do right now by having these discussions. I mean, what we were doing in Steuben County is, and from the time we started 911 12 years ago, we were at a 9-minute dispatch for an ambulance. We'd tone a department for 3 minutes, we'd give them 3 minutes, 3 minutes more. At the end of 9 minutes, we would start the next available agency, whether it was ALS, BLS. If it's ALS, most likely we had a rig coming out of the city or a flag car or somebody already en route. But if it's a BLS call, it was 9 minutes. Now we're looking at cutting that down, that if you don't, we use a program called I Am Responding, which pops up on your phone when you get the dispatch, and you can acknowledge whether you're en route or whether you're unavailable. Do it right on your phone. Shows up on the screen in the dispatch center. So what we're going to be looking at is if the agency doesn't have a driver and an EMT en route to the station within 3 minutes, we're going to look at dispatching the next available resource. They can always be canceled if somebody comes up and says. We asked our agencies to status their rigs. Call us every morning and tell us whether your ambulance is in service or not. They went nuts. They said, no way, we can't do that. So, I mean, you know,
They don't
you're talking
want to
about
go through.
being able to provide ALS service, they don't even want to status their BLS.
I thought it was a
rigs
great
during the day.
idea. As soon as he said it at the meeting,
It's a fantastic idea.
everybody was like, wow, keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, no, they,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because
That's
of,
the truth.
if I want to run to the store and get something, I don't want to have to call the dispatch center and say, hey, take my ambulance out of service for half an hour because I'm running down to Wegmans to grab some milk and some groceries. You know, they don't want to hold their providers and say, who's in town today? Who's going to take call? They don't schedule people. They give them a pager and say, hey, when the pager goes off, come to the station. You know, they never know from day to day who's showing up. You know, the agencies that have staff leasing people at least know that they got a driver and an EMT available. So Steuben County it's a different world. It's a different world in Steuben County than it is down here. You know, and we're trying to find ways to be able to do what you're talking about. But it's going to take some time to get there. It's going to take some steps. And I think by looking at this, might be able to open the door at maybe us eventually getting to that point of where we can have staffed medics, you know, across the county, whether through contract or whether the county hires people and does it themselves. I don't know what's going to end up happening with that, but, you know, we had a meeting with AMR and we met with them and said, hey, we've got a big problem here. You know, you guys may end up picking up a lot of this slack. And you know, we were very frank and candid with the agencies. And we've had 2 meetings with the captains and chiefs over the past 4 months, and it's been very well attended. They provided us good feedback, and I just hope that we can keep that energy level up. Because since we started meeting with them, we're now taking calls in the 911 center where people are saying, look, we don't have an EMT available today, start a mutual aid company. They're now picking up the phone and calling us, where before they'd let it go 9 minutes before and just let the dispatch center do it. And now they're 2-3 minutes into the call, they'll pick up the phone and say, we don't have an EMT available, send us mutual aid. So we're already starting to see some changes based upon just having meetings with them and making them aware. Look, we got problems. We got major problems. It's not unusual for somebody to wait 40 to 45 minutes for an ambulance in Steuben County.
Yeah, you have a rig sitting in Cohocton. They ain't want to not getting called.
But that's been changed.
Yeah,
That's been changed.
I was saying, that's what happened 6 months ago.
That's what,
You
yeah.
know, people were
And that
waiting
was-
an hour, 15 minutes for a rig, when you have a full staff rig sitting there.
Yeah.
And it takes time to get your volunteer corps, your officers, and like you said, the fire chiefs that don't want to back down, to actually say, hey, this is a good thing. Let's put the rig that's there on mutual aid type situation. It's no different than the city. We no longer really have a fly car in the city. We send a full rig to Addison, Tuscarora, Woodhull, because you get out there, you never know you have a transporting rig.
You have to.
And we have a full crew, so we can transport the patient back. Now, there's times we'll get out there and the patient does not want to go with AMR. And it's a fight to get the patient to go.
And the other battle that we're having is that, you know, an agency will, you know, maybe Woodhull is going to Corning Hospital. They're on their way to Corning Hospital, and Corning says, you know, you got to take them to Arnold, you got to take them to Packer. Now, the volunteer EMS person who took an hour out of their workday is now 2.5 hours out of their workday because they had to take that extra trip to go to Arnold or to go to, you know, Packer or Strong or wherever. and it's killing our volunteers.
We got volunteer agencies that are refusing to transport anywhere now. And you got Fremont, they made it clear at the first meeting.
Yeah.
They're not leaving, going any further north. If I have a medic say I gotta go
They're either
strong,
going to Noyes or they're going to St. James.
yep, but they
That's
will
where
not
they
go
go.
anywhere else. We had a trauma patient, and they would not transport that patient to Strong. We actually had to switch patients on the side of the highway to our rig, so you could get to Strong, and you
Can
can't
they
do that.
Can they do that?
Yeah.
They can actually, when they've made contact with a patient, like a seen patient,
If they have a
can
policy
refuse to
that's published,
transport them?
if they have a policy that's published that said we're only gonna transport to XOY facility, yes.
But don't your protocols say, sorry?
I mean, it seems to me like there is a clear need in our region to address the ability of more agencies to provide ALS on a part-time basis. I think maybe in revising that policy, we can address issues like this and say, no, if in our region you are picking up a patient, you are delivering that patient to an appropriate receiving facility. And I think, Ross, that would be within our purview as the
Absolutely.
REMAC to say, this is the way it's gonna be.
Like I said, they practice ALS based on your rules.
So,
I think that would increase the volunteers, even if they're ALS, the BLS corps aren't getting. I mean, you got, I think of 2 departments in my area that have 1 EMT
One EMT.
per department. You
One.
can't run 24/7 BLS volunteer with 1 EMT, that's impossible. You know, if
but
you-
we're not even talking about BLS.
No, what I'm saying, if you
Yeah.
give them an opportunity to say, hey, paramedics may be able to do this,
Yeah.
it may pick up more volunteers throughout. Now granted, the 2 departments that have only 1, you're not gonna be paramedics, because they're too little, they don't run enough calls.
No.
But it's gonna help other volunteer departments in our county, on the BLS side too, if they have ALS medics there, they can take BLS calls, you know?
So, who would like, yes,
I think it's time to move on.
I agree. I was just about to say, who would like to help me draft a new policy addressing our ALS operational approval? Don't all jump at once. Brandon, thank you. All right.
I can't like, you're drowning there.
I was gonna start crying. All right, we have been talking far too long. Thank you all for your patience.
Well, thank you guys too. I
Next,
appreciate you listening to me.
next year's meetings, I've just picked similar dates to this year's meetings. Now they're at the bottom of the agenda, February 7th, May 2nd, September 5th, and December 5th. I'm gonna vote on that, that's when they're gonna be, damn it. Any final issues for this
Spoke like a
meeting
true chairman.
and this year?
Yeah, I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank God. Why don't we do that now?
Wait, marathon on that. Marathon meeting.
Aaron, I'm in so.
They want this
to meet you.
dispatch
Oh,
them.
you as well. Yes, I've heard so much about you. I feel like I'm going to Walmart.
I was about to say, we need to go back home to that, you know?
Well, right now,
Bill.
So Charlie, you buy the kid.